Matthew chapter 5. It's a really long chapter. We're going to take a really long time to go through it, just in case you were wondering. It's as the Sermon on the Mount. The 16 verses deal with what I would consider the Christian's character, meaning the person that has put their faith in Jesus, what should mark their life. The rest of it then deals with the conduct that grows from that character. Because character always comes before conduct. Because what we are determines what we do. So as a follower of Christ, we should do things and we should be different than the world. And what we will see is kind of what that would look like. What we're going to look at today, it's known as the Beatitudes. But if you're wondering if the term beatitude is in the Bible, the answer is no. It's not. You're not going to find it here except for in your heading, which was added by the translators. This was simply the message that Jesus preached to this great multitude. But this word beatitude means this. It means blessed. It comes from the Latin, and it means blessed. Now, in the first century, there was little agreement among the Jews as to what the Messianic kingdom looked like and what it would be like. They were trying to figure it out. One of the popular assumptions of the day was that the yoke would be shattered and there would be political peace and a mounting prosperity. That's what the Jews were looking for, was a political peace and prosperity. It's kind of interesting to me when I think about that because I think that's exactly what people are looking for today. So to say that things don't change very much, I think that's a very accurate statement. Now, that's the backdrop to Matthew chapter 5. It's the backdrop to which Jesus uses to proclaim his kingdom and himself as a king. A kingdom which has been called the upside down kingdom because it goes contrary to what the world system is like. It's the kingdom which we are going to look at today, and we're going to see three different things as we look at Matthew chapter 5. In the first two verses, what we're going to see is this foundation for his kingdom. Jesus is going to lay the foundation. And so in verse 1 it says, "And seeing the multitude, he went up on a mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him." It's interesting to me that it starts off with this term seeing. It says, "And seeing the multitude." And so what we learn about God's kingdom is that the king sees. He sees the people that are in his kingdom. This word means knowing. So not only does he see them, but he knows the people that are there. And the idea behind it is that he is being attentive to the people that he is seeing. So it's not like he just sees them as he walks by. He sees them, he's attentive to them, and he has a message that he's going to give to them. We know that this multitude was a large gathering. That we read about it in chapter 4, verse 25. These people came from all kinds of regions around with various issues, and they followed Jesus. And Jesus' response to this was to go up onto a mountain and sit down and began to teach. That was the custom of the day. The teacher would go somewhere, sit down, and he would teach from a seated position, and everybody would stand. I think we got it backwards. What do you think? I don't know. Just a thought. But when you play this to its full conclusion, how many kings would take the time to be attentive to the common persons of the day, let alone the group that was mentioned in chapter 4? How many kings would take that time? It just doesn't happen. But in Jesus' upside down kingdom, it's a kingdom that is its foundation is This ringing is driving me nuts. But it's a kingdom that is, should I grab this microphone, Isaac? Just keep going, okay. I got a crink in my neck. But it's a kingdom where the king takes time to pay attention to what's going on because he actually cares about the people. And he wants to be a part of their life. In this upside-down kingdom, the foundation is the king is present. The king sees, the king is attentive. The king is there. Verse 2 says, and he opened his mouth and he taught them, saying. So now, not only is he there, but he then begins to speak to them. This king, he is a teacher. Think about how countercultural that is. A king being a teacher. The Sermon on the Mount is sometimes thought of as this: Jesus' declaration of the kingdom. We have our Declaration of Independence. Karl Marx had his Communist Manifesto. Here, Jesus lays the foundation for his kingdom, letting us know what it's all about. And it's all about where Jesus, the King, is present in the lives of his people. We need to understand, though, that the Sermon on the Mount isn't dealing with our salvation. It's laying the foundation for the disciples on how to live in light of this new kingdom, this upside-down kingdom, as followers of the King. What should mark their lives? What should be there in their midst? It's going to show us how we should live when Jesus is truly the Lord of our life. You know, you can get a little bobblehead Jesus, and you could put him there, and you could be like, hey, that's kind of cool. Some people think that Jesus is a bobblehead. You know, you ask him a question, hit the thing, yeah. Some people think he's a genie in a bottle. I get my 3 wishes. Some people think Jesus is their homeboy. You can even get the shirt. People have various thoughts about Jesus. But what Jesus needs to be and longs to be is our Lord, our King, the one who we surrender ourselves to, every aspect of our life, that we allow him to form us. Do you realize you guys are all being formed by something? And did you know that the world spends lots of money to exploit you, to form you into what they think you should be like? Trying to tell you which products you should buy so that you can have that nice flowing hair. Or that if you buy this certain toothpaste, you might get kissed by the girl. And it's funny because what I'm finding is that there's a total difference between how people are targeting me. I'm now getting things in Facebook for dentures. And that's not the worst. I got some for Depends. That's humbling. Like, I don't need those. I mean, there's probably going to come a time, but it's crazy. But they target us. Isn't it amazing? Conversation with somebody, then open Facebook, and then what you were talking about is now there? It's kind of creepy, but it happens. They're listening to you, trying to form you into the image of what they want you to be. But we're all being formed into something. But Jesus came with a different kingdom to form us into his image, that at the end of the day we would look more like him, that we would live for him, that we'd allow him to be the Lord of our lives. So Jesus is going to use this to train his disciples with the message that he wants them to bring to the world when he's gone. The Sermon on the Mount had a significant impact on the early church. Early Christians made many references to it, and their lives displayed the message that was proclaimed here. The Beatitudes, which means the blessings, could also be understood as the believer's be attitudes. The attitudes that we should be. And so Jesus sets forth both the nature and the aspiration of his citizens for his kingdom. And so we are to be learning and modeling the character traits of his upside-down kingdom even today. A kingdom where the king is near, where the king is attentive, where the king is loving, where the king is present, where the king truly cares. And as disciples, as followers of Christ, what God is asking us is to truly care about the people we come in contact with. Whoever God brings into your path that day, whoever you find yourselves in communication with at that moment, to really care, take time to care. Take time to listen. Take time to love. But now what we're going to do in verses 3 through 5 is look at the upside-down citizen's nature. What should be in our nature? And in verse 3 it says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Now we're going to come to the series of blessed. By saying, "Blessed is the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." These are the character traits that mark our lives, and they're the goals that we should strive for. The idea behind this ancient Greek word, blessed, is that idea happy. But it's in the truest godly sense, not as we would look at it in modern day. Where when somebody says that, "Hey, yeah, I'm just happy," what they're really saying is, right now I'm comfortable. I'm thoroughly entertained at the moment. Things are going okay. But here, it's not a happiness that is based upon our circumstances. It's our happiness based upon this King who's present, who loves us. What I found very fascinating is if you contrast this first, the first thing that Jesus says here is with the last thing that the Old Testament says. The last word in the Old Testament is curse. The first word in the opening sermon here, Jesus begins with, is blessed. So when God breaks his silence 400 years, he starts with a blessing. Blessed is the one who is poor in spirit. And that would have been these people. For 400 years hadn't heard from God. And now he shows up in their midst with a message that says they could be blessed. They could be blessed with this blessing that creates a happiness to be enjoyed. Notice that he says, "Blessed be," or he doesn't say "blessed be," but "blessed are." We are blessed. But many of us want to be blessed. It's interesting, if you go to a third world country and, they always pray for your blessing, that you would be blessed. And I always try to tell them, we already are blessed. We're blessed with so much more than you would ever imagine. And it's a concept that's hard for them to grasp because for them, their blessing means a physical well-being, whether it's health or wealth. But here it's the poor in spirit who are blessed. Those who don't have the spiritual assets that you would think would be necessary to experience these blessings that God has for us, they would be what you would call spiritually bankrupt. These are the people that were at that place where they knew that what they had to offer God was not much, but what God was offering them was everything. And they, in their place of spiritual bankruptcy, put their faith in Jesus and realized that as they put their faith in this king, that was the blessing. And that even if their circumstances didn't change, their blessing was the kingdom of heaven, this new kingdom that Jesus brought. That's what their reward was. A kingdom that wasn't given on the basis of race or merit or zeal or wealth. It was a kingdom that was given to the poor, the despised, the prostitutes, those who were so poor they knew they had nothing that they could offer to try to even gain it. Charles Spurgeon said this, "The poor in spirit are lifted from the dunghill and set not among hired servants in the field, but among princes in the kingdom." Poor in spirit, the word sounds as if they describe the owners of nothing, and yet they describe the inheritors of all things. I love that. As a child of the King, we've inherited everything. But the problem is we live in this place between the already and the not yet, already redeemed, but not yet where Jesus is. And we wait for his return to take us to where he is, but we live in this yet, okay, I've been redeemed, but now I still got to deal with all the stuff that goes on around me. And this is why it's so important to lift our eyes to the heavens, to look where Jesus is, to take our eyes off of what's going on, to focus on the King who is on a throne in his new kingdom. And remember where our blessings come from. It says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." The Greek word for to mourn here is the strongest sense of the word in the Greek language. It's the word for a passionate lament for one who has lost a loved one. It was the brokenhearted. A passionate lament. The problem is mourning is difficult, isn't it? And the hardest mourning is not when you're mourning the loss of a loved one that has passed away, but when you're mourning the loss of the loved one who has walked away. And you have to watch as they make choices like, as they experience things that are hurtful. Grief, it's a reality that we all face. This. Gone. Not as a destination. And as we walk on this path of sorrow and mourning, we still walk towards the King who is present, trusting that what we're mourning is not the end of the story. And so we keep on. And we're told that those who mourn know something special about God. In Philippians 3:10, we're told that we fellowship with him in his suffering. In Isaiah 53, we associate with this man of sorrow who is acquainted with our grief. As we walk on this path of mourning and grief, what we see is that God is going through the pain, the sorrow, the hurts. And because he's present, we don't have to walk alone, but he walks with us in the midst of that mourning. And this is the nature of the citizens of heaven. And then he says in verse 5, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Now, it's really impossible to translate this Greek word, which is praus, for meek, with just one English word. Just like love. You know, we say, oh, I love pizza, and oh, I love my wife, but I don't love them the same way. Just like there's multiple words for love in the Greek. This word is the proper balance of anger and indifference. It's personality properly controlled and humble, but it's also strength under control. That's what meekness means. It's one who can be angry, but restrain their wrath in obedience to the will of God, and will not be angry unless he can be angry and not sin. But they're also not provoked by others very easily. Meekness shows a willingness to submit to and work under authority and disregards their own rights and their own privileges. It's somebody who gives up their rights for somebody else. The meek before God submit to his will and conform to his word. The meek before men are strong, humble, gentle, patient, and long-suffering. And their meekness is a result of being confident that God watches out for them and protects them. They hold on to the promise that they're going to inherit the earth, reminding them that they're not going to end up on the short end of the deal, but that God's going to take care of them. So upside-down citizens' nature finds happiness in the King who meets them in spiritual poverty, in mourning, and in meekness. Those are the areas that God himself puts us in. But in verses 6 through 12, what we're going to see is the upside-down citizen, what their character looks like. And he says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled." Now this term hunger and thirst, it's describing a profound hunger that can't be satisfied by a snack. And how many people are just snacking, trying to find satisfaction? And we all know that if all you do is get a healthy diet of snack food, it's going to be anything but healthy. There are certain things that you need in your life that, help you to grow strong and not grow fat. And yet, so many people are satisfied with snacks. There's a reason they're packaged so nicely. There's a reason that they talk to you in the grocery store. It's there. For some of you, it's the ice cream aisle that calls your name and knows your zip code. Have you ever noticed that when you check out, it knows you? And it gives you coupons to buy the things that aren't that great for you. How does it know that? What is it saying? Be satisfied with snacks. But here, hungering and thirsting for righteousness, it's a longing that endures and is never completely satisfied this side of eternity. And so the Christian, hungry for many things, power, authority, success, comfort, happiness, that's what a lot of people are hungering for. But how many of us hunger and thirst for righteousness? So how does one hunger and thirst for righteousness? How does that express itself? Well, let's go back to where the first mention of the word righteousness was in the Bible. Abraham believed God, and it was accredited to him as righteousness. We hunger and thirst for righteousness as we live a life of faith. You see, it's when Abraham put his faith in God that God deposited, a banker's term, his righteousness in his account. And so to hunger and thirst in righteousness means we live a life of faith, not faith in faith, but faith in Jesus as our King. Again, Charles, a very smart man, he says, he hungers and thirsts after righteousness. He does not hunger and thirst that his own political party may get into power, but he hungers and thirsts that righteousness may be done in the land. He does not that his opinions may come to the front, and that his own sect or denomination may increase in number and influence, but he does desire that righteousness may come to the fore. So we be glorified for our faith to point people to Jesus. And fill them with as much as that they could eat. Be filled, satisfied, but yet they'll still have a longing for more. I love that. And one of the things that I have personally found is that as I increase the steps of faith that I take, the more and more I want to take more steps. The more and more I want to kind of do things. The more and more I want to go to Sudan. But no, when you take steps of faith, you find that they kind of stir up within desire for more. But then he goes on, he says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." Those who show mercy are those who have already received mercy. The merciful will show mercy to those who are weaker and poorer. The merciful look for those who weep and mourn. The merciful will forgive others, looking to restore broken relationships. The merciful will choose to think the best in others. The merciful will not expect much from others. The merciful are compassionate to those who are outwardly sinful. And the merciful have a care for the souls of all men. The merciful care about people. One reason God gave King David mercy, I believe, was because how merciful he was to King Saul. He had opportunities to kill him. But he said, I'm not going to lift my hand against the Lord's anointed. And he received mercy. If you want mercy, be merciful. That's how you do it. But then, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. The phrase pure of heart has the idea of straightness, honesty, and clarity. Two ideas connected to this. An inner purity as opposed to a ceremonial purity. A lot of people think, well, I'm pure because I did. Well, the purity here is this inner purity that God himself accomplished. Yes, we can wash the outside, but only God can wash the inside. Single, undivided heart, one who is in their commitment to King Jesus. Most wonderful reward of all. They get to see God. About the Jewish who knew that if they saw God, they would die. Moses said, I can't look at God face to face unless he kills me. But here, the pure in heart could look at the face of God, could see him face to face. And you and I get to do that. How? As we look at Jesus. Jesus said this, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And with the King being present, we could see the face of God. And we could look at it. And we could see God's expressions. One of the reasons text message and emails is the most horrible way to communicate with people is because you can't see their expressions. But to be able to see God face to face means you could see his facial expressions. You could see the joy that is on his face, the love, the concern, the brokenness, all the emotions that we all feel we could see in the face of God. And the pure of heart, the one that God has cleaned the inside, gives us the ability to look at the face of God. And what I'm finding is that those who aren't of pure of heart, they don't want to look at the face of God. They're afraid. They're so worried that God's going to look at them and say, how could you have done that? Why did you do that? But when we look at the face of God, we will see the brokenness of the God that said to Adam and Eve when they were in the garden after they sinned, where are you? With brokenness and a longing to restore that relationship. Where are you? To those who are grieving, where are you? Why are you? And as he mourns and he grieves with us. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. This isn't a description of the one who lives in peace. It's the one who brings peace and overcomes evil with good. And the reward of the peacemaker is what? They're recognized as a child of the King. They share his passions for peace and reconciliation, the breaking down of the walls between people. That's what the peacemaker is. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. These who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, not their own stupidity. When I'm persecuted, I usually deserve it. I'm just going to be honest. I've done something, said something, and people get upset. But those who are persecuted for their faith, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Peter recognized that suffering might come to some Christians for reasons other than their faithfulness in 1 Peter 4:15 and 16. But that's not what Jesus addressed here. Jesus is addressing the character traits of those who are persecuted for their faith in Jesus. And this is so countercultural. You see, we don't give an award for the most pure of heart, do we? Or the most persecuted, or the most poor in spirit. No, we just give participation awards. But culture doesn't esteem these character traits. These are the character traits of the kingdom of heaven. And then it ends in verse 11. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. We can't limit persecution just to physical opposition. Jesus numbers insult, or adds to it insults and malice to those who are persecuted. In verse 10, they are persecuted for righteousness' sake. In verse 11, they're persecuted for the sake of Jesus because of their faith. Their faith brought about their persecution. And even with all of these warnings, Jesus still expects faith to be lived out. He wants us to live a life of faith that honors him, that's countercultural, that people will say, hey, why are you doing that? Why are you living that way? Why are you talking that way? How come you can be different? And we know that early Christians were falsely persecuted for Jesus' sake. Christians were accused of many things back in the Bible time. They were accused of cannibalism because of communion in the Lord's Supper. They were accused of immorality because people misunderstood the love feasts where people got together and loved on each other and shared a meal. They were accused of treason because they wouldn't honor the Roman gods or participate in emperor worship. Many false things. But he says, rejoice and be exceedingly glad, which literally means this, that the persecuted should leap for joy. And how can they do that? Because the persecuted will have great rewards in heaven. Because they're persecuted, they're in good company. They're with the prophets before them and the king who was with them. Here's some more recent persecutions that took place. George Roper, one of Canterbury's martyrs in the 16th century, came to the stake, leaping for joy, and hugged the stake he was to be burned on like a friend. Dr. Taylor, an English Protestant martyr, when asked how he was, he responded by saying, "Well, God be praised, good Master Sheriff, never better, for now I am almost home. I am even at my Father's house." Lawrence Saunders, a Protestant martyr, with a smiling face, embraced the stake of his execution and kissed it, saying, "Welcome the cross of Christ. Welcome everlasting life." The world persecuted them because Jesus' upside-down kingdom was opposite and opposed the world's thinking. But as citizens of a different kingdom, that the king impacted their lives, they were able to conduct themselves in a way that they could leap for joy even in the face of horrible persecution. Because they knew that they would be soon with a king who loved them. And so as citizens of that kingdom, let's allow that to impact our lives. May our lives be formed in the image and likeness of our King Jesus. That we would become more like the King, not just do kingly things, but that would mark our lives. And so I want to leave you with this today. Be happy. Be blessed, because King Jesus is with you. Forming your nature and your character so that you can live for a different king and his kingdom, even right now here on earth. Knowing that he's with you, that he's for you, and that he's smiling on you. That he can understand your mourning and your grief and your pain and your sorrow, your persecutions. And he longs to be with you. That's what makes Jesus a different king and what makes his kingdom so different. So may we be those who are happy because of what King Jesus is doing in our lives.